Very good.
All right. Let's see. I need to start out with this pursuant to the Illinois Attorney General's guidance to public bodies on the Opening Meetings Act during the COVID-19 pandemic, dated July 2, 2020. Board members may participate without being physically present in compliance with the established provision. So having said that, the meeting's been called to order. Roll call, please.
Member Berman.
Here.
Member Dinah.
Here.
Chairman Hayden.
Here.
Member Herron.
Here.
Member Hurd.
Here.
Member Joel.
Here.
We are good.
We have a quorum. Thank you. All right, we're up to item number 3, which is the chairman's remarks. And actually, I do have some today. Want to welcome all the new members. Appreciate your expertise in joining the board. Another important project moving forward. If I can, since there are new members and we're not used to everyone's voice yet, when you make a motion, would you make the motion and then identify yourself? So like, for example, motion Hayden. So it will help us out when we're taking minutes and things like that. And then also wanted to mention that in your package, you probably saw the schedules. There's a lot of special calls on there. We're going to meet bi-weekly, so we can, or bi-monthly, so we can get through this project and move it forward. So that's the extent of my comments. We're moving on to public comment. Item 4, there is public comment.
We have a record of attendance only for Mike Rampa of the Bolingbrook Police Department.
All right, thank you, Mike. Item 5, committee approval required for the meeting calendar, the PAC meeting calendar, which has been revised. I just talked about that. So we'll need a motion to place that on file.
Motion Herron.
Thank you, Steve.
Second.
Second was Joel. Did you get that, Andrea?
All right, so
I got it.
Okay, thank you. All right. So roll call, please.
Member Herron.
Here. Yes.
Member Hurd.
Yes.
Member Joel.
Joel's yes.
Member Barman.
Yes.
Member Dinah.
Yes.
Chairman Hayden.
Yes. Okay, quickly moving on to item number 6, the DDERS portable mobile replacement, 6.1, the NFPA requirements discussion. I believe that is Jim Conlon.
Yes, sir. And I believe Eve has some summary slides that she's going to share with you.
Okay.
You can go next one, Eve. So real quickly, what I've tried to do is summarize a 69-page document. I got it down to 4 slides. I'll just quickly run through them. But before I get into the details, let me just say where this is at. So NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, published a new standard last year, and it addresses basically portable radios and associated devices like microphones and others that have to perform in high hazard environments. So potentially flammable combustible liquid environments, high temperature, blah, blah, blah. And you'll see that in the standards. And then because it was asked at a prior discussion, what is the status of NFPA 1802? What's a nationally recognized standard? Is it law? No, it isn't until somebody adopts it. So, if OSHA or your community adopted it, then it would have the effect of law or regulation. But to my knowledge, it's not been adopted by any of those organizations. Having said that, just like other NFPA standards, the courts generally consider them, a reasonable benchmark, and generally things that don't comply are, the burden of proof then becomes on the accused party to show why what they were doing was otherwise acceptable. So that's kind of where it stands today. Let me just quickly go through what's in there, and then we can discuss it. So basically what it requires is independent laboratory certification of all the devices. That's the radio, the antennas, the microphone, everything is attached to the radio by an accredited laboratory. need to test a minimum of 21 specimens. The pretty extensive quality assurance program required, including failure mode and effect analysis, complaint reporting, investigation, safety alerts, recall, which are probably things that most of the major, high quality manufacturers do anyway, but it makes these things part of the standard. Visual audible alerts for low batteries, has modes for operating in a hazard zone, which typically would be flammable combustible liquids or in high heat levels, those kind of things. Has minimum volume levels for each of those zones. Standardized locations of controls, requires timeout timers, and has backlighting and readability standards. Go next one, Eve, if you would. Requires a standard location for the emergency activation button, the color, the operation, the reset of the button. Remote speaker mics have standards, including the detection failure. Like right now on your radios, you might have a failure of a mic and you wouldn't know it until you just couldn't get through. Now it's basically electronically supervised. It requires announcement of, there's a priority list for all the announcements and what sound levels they're at. Standardizes LED alerts, including over temperature alerts, which are big for obviously fire service applications. Requires basically sort of a black box type of internal recording, indication of long-term high temperatures, more than 10 minutes. That's cumulative 10 minutes. That's not just one time. Like I said, data logging and storage in a black box. So should there be an injury, a fatality, or other type of investigation, you'll be able to see in the radio when the transmitter was keyed, messages received, announcements made, all those kind of things are in the black box. Standards for Bluetooth connectivity. And then the last one is basically, again, applies mostly to the fire radios, which we have today, is that they can operate in hazardous environments. And the two terms are non-incentive or intrinsically safe. And those two things are not quite the same, but we won't go into the technical details right now. Next slide, please, Eve. These are some of the testing requirements. Doing real quick. Abrasion for the display, because it has a lot of glass on some of these radios. Vibration, heat, and immersion. Immersion is in water. Heat resistance, 200 degrees for 15 minutes. There's some other heat tests, but pretty difficult tests for some of these radios. Ingress protection to keep things from getting in the radio, impact, corrosion, integrity, cable pullout like microphone cords, those things like that. Heat and flame resistance, and the performance of power source, meaning the batteries. One more slide. Some other testing, durability and legibility of the displays, water drainage, the function of the controls, electronic temperature tests. They actually tumble the radios and they vibrate the radios. Radio frequency requirements, radio antenna requirements, integrity of the case, speech quality, transmit power, frequency stability, and receiver stability. So that's 69 pages in 3 minutes or less, but it kind of tells you, how challenging the standard is to meet. I don't believe there's any manufacturer that has, well, I know there's no manufacturer that has a radio that's certified today. Some of the manufacturers say they have a radio that will meet the standards. I believe, and I think Linda's had a conversation with Motorola, that they are working on it. I would expect most of the major manufacturers will have a radio that will meet the standard in the relatively near future, but that's to be determined. Let me just stop there and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, Jim, I have a couple of questions. You think there will be a lab available to test these radios in the near future? So what is your near future? By the time we're ready to purchase? Maybe not pass the project to the board, but actually purchase?
That's a good question, because it's really, interesting timing that we're having these discussions about purchasing new radios and changing. And I guess if you told me when the purchase was, I probably better answer your question. I just guessing, and I don't have any inside information. I would expect by the end of this calendar year that most, if not all, the manufacturers would have a certified radio. But that's just a guess. I don't know, and I don't know what the ETSB's timing is either.
Okay, Linda, do you think that'd be pretty good timing?
Well, I think, part of it is that the testing process hasn't been put out yet. So I think there's just a lot of radios and manufacturers that are ready to go once the testing process is, somebody's going for a walk. once the testing process is ready to go. I think from a timing perspective, here's the curveball we have right now is the current radios we're using. The batteries are in short supply, no supply. We've under emergency procurement, purchased everything that we can find at this point. So we're going to have to look at batteries, and we can get batteries that are aftermarket. The difference is that they're UL, they're not FM, and so that's that. So we're going to have a fire discussion, and this is only on the fire side, of course. So we're going to have a discussion of the comfort level with chiefs on the usability of a radio with a non-certified battery. Will it work? Yes, but has it been certified? No. So this is where we're at. And this is what we talked about over a year ago at the board level of end of support, meaning as long as supplies last. So the first thing to go has been batteries. So, time is of the essence. This is only on the 7,000s, and we have 8,000s in the mix right now. But it's a question of whether or not you want to do more 8,000s or go to the Apex Next version, which we have not seen the ruggedized version yet for the fire service, but they're working on getting us some stuff to test.
Chief, can I ask Linda a question on the batteries?
Please.
Linda, that the battery issue is the intrinsically safe aspect of the battery, the green dot batteries versus the regular, or is it some other issue?
Right. So you have an M. I always do this wrong. Somehow MF sticks in my head. It's the other way.
Sorry.
So that the radio's MF, the radio's FM, the batteries FM. The FM batteries we're looking all over the place, but we're in the same boat as everybody else who has an Apex 7000 XE radio. So it's that intrinsically safe piece. You can get a UL battery, but you don't have the official connection of an FM battery with an FM radio. You have a UL battery. So that's the challenge.
The battery will work, the radio will work. You just don't have a 100% certification that it will work safely in a hazardous environment. That's the
right. Right. And then, there's warranty issues, but we don't care about that in the sense of we're probably not going to keep repairing these radios because we're going to replace them. And then when we send them in to be repaired, they can't, there's, this industry standard of FM no longer exists. So you can't certify them. So there's no point in repairing them.
Okay. Any other questions for Jim?
Yeah, Chairman Hayden, Andy Dine, I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Andy.
So a statement to begin with, I do believe there is some value with having NFPA 1802 compliant radios. And I believe the question would be, how long are we willing to wait? Do we wait? Or do we move forward with getting new batteries that are UL listed but not FM? So my question would be, if we do continue with our current radios while we wait out the NFPA 1802 compliant radios, if we get UL listed batteries, the radio is not certified, but there any indication that would be that the radio is not safe if it's not certified?
Okay, I don't know the answer to that.
And that's for Chief Connolly.
So I think that's I think that's the multi-million-dollar question. I think what the FM process did was give you assurance that the radio would be safe in a hazardous environment. My gut says more than likely probably is, but you basically don't have anything to prove it. And that's where the rub comes in. So you got, maybe firefighters or union members or somebody who's, now gets wind of this and they're uncomfortable with the radio, or God forbid something goes wrong in a, natural gas leak or something in somebody's home. And the allegation, at least, is the radio is now the ignition source. That's where it's going to become a potential problem. in my gut, do I think the radio probably is safe? My gut says probably, yeah, but I can't prove it because I'm not the lab testing it. And as Linda said, you just don't have the certifications to go with it.
And are there any agencies that are currently running this setup with FM radios with UL batteries? And has there any been recorded issues with that you're aware of?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would think that maybe a question Linda could ask Motorola, but I've certainly not seen anything in the literature or in the trade publications.
I think John Lozar is on, or Matt Barman. We have a couple right now that are in play, don't we? This is before we knew the certification issue, because we bought batteries from Motorola and didn't have this whole conversation.
Yes, there's, I believe, 17 batteries out there that are UL versus the FM certified that have been distributed.
Those batteries come with a green dot on them or not, John?
No, they have no indication, with the exception of saying on the bottom, Impress 2. There is no other indication on it that they're certified any other way.
Okay, so Motorola is not giving you any assurance that they're going to meet the standard or be safe.
Yeah, there's nothing that's visually indicative of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your answers. Anyone else? Question for Jim? All right. I think that just reaffirms that we need to move this project along. The line of questioning, it worries me a little bit, so we'll try and move this project along. So no further questions. We'll move on to 6.2, which is the encryption discussion. We'll continue that. As everyone probably knows, Jim Connolly never sleeps. He's always working. He's always researching. And so over the weekend, he found a short video. It's about a 3-minute video that he sent. I actually watched it. I'm not going to mind watching it again. I think it was great, and we'd like everyone to see it. And then after that, we can continue with the discussion about encryption. So Eve, can you put that on for us? Thank you.
We've had people listening to scanners, public safety scanners, as far back as we've had radio systems. If you're being transported by an ambulance to the hospital, you don't want that same scanner community listening in on what your medical problem is at that point.
Specifically, law enforcement is very worried about what it can be heard. Therefore, we have agencies that are making the decision to go encrypted.
There's a challenge in coordinating with agencies so you don't unintentionally lock out providers by putting an encryption key in that someone else who's going to need to jump in and communicate is unable to get into the system.
Communities are focused on, in some cases, what their local dealer has shared with them, their local radio dealer has shared with them as capabilities, in lieu of the experts that are trying to plan from a much larger standpoint of interoperability.
State and local partners, for the most part, have seen the need and are slowly but surely, as they have funds, implementing encryption on their radio systems. And the problem is that their encryption sometimes is very different from ours. So we have to do a lot of pre-planning and discussions with them on making sure that we have common encryption systems and that we can work together in an encrypted mode.
The entire system is capable of AES 256 encryption. We didn't want a proprietary encryption. We wanted a standard 256 encryption that everybody uses.
A lot of agencies will use DES, Digital Encryption Standard, simply because that's an old standard, it's easy and it's cheap to implement. But the problem is that DES was broken years ago. Federal agencies are prohibited from using it, except in certain circumstances. So if you really want to be interoperable, you're not going to use DES, because most federal agencies will tell you, we can't do that. We won't do that.
You have a 40-piece kids puzzle, takes you 5 minutes to 10 minutes maybe to be able to finish it. You have a 256-piece puzzle, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer. So do you want to encrypt your sensitive channels with something that is only 40 pieces long or 256 pieces long? Like, you tell me where you want your security to be.
For a public safety agency trying to implement encryption, obviously, I think their first call needs to go to NLEC, NLECC, which is the National Law Enforcement Communication Center, because they're frankly the experts in encryption, and they have a huge amount of knowledge and lessons learned on how to do encryption and how to get it going properly.
And I think in the industry, what we should be trying to do is catch people before they do it. It's a heck of a lot easier to get people to make the choice that's going to be the best choice in the long run for them before they do it, so that they're not trying to fix something or undo something after the fact.
All right, I thought that was a good video. But what I'd like to do is open that discussion up, that discussion. I think it's going to be one of the toughest issues to finally settle when we purchase new radios. And I don't know if everybody knows it, and Matt, if you can help me out here. Matt is had been a Motorola radio engineer. He has considerable knowledge when it comes to these things. Matt, you've been talking about DES and AES, so do you have any comments moving forward? Have you been in touch with that organization, that INLEC, at all? What's your opinions on this issue?
I have not reached out to them directly, but we looked at the CISA website that they reference at the end. And that's where they recommend, if you do encryption, you do multi-key. They have like a one-pager on there of recommendations. They do recommend AES 256. But I used the CISA website for those recommendations that video pointed to.
Okay. All right. So then, where do we need to go? What questions do we need to answer to finally make a decision on encryption? Matt?
So for me, I think if everyone agrees it's AES 256 is where we want to go, I think that's the right answer. That's what all our neighbors have. It's what the Fed, what the recommendations from these federal organizations tell us. I think to ease our transition, we also do ADP so that we can keep our current, so we don't have to make changes at the time of rolling out radios. And then you do that as a multi-step process. You buy the radios, you field them with 256 or 6 enabled in them. So we get stuff like ITTF encryption and stuff like that, but you don't change any of the current talk groups. And then once they're fielded, we come back, and if police want TAC channels to be encrypted with 256, we then transition them to a different channel that is encrypted, because to do that all at once, I think is too big of a lift. Because it's timing, it's deploying radios, and then changing consoles, making sure everything works. And to do that very quickly, would be very difficult. So I think getting both ADP and AES 256 are the way to go. I think getting multi-key is what CISA also recommends, so that you can have different talk groups with different keys and go from there.
All right, and fire and LE will still be able to communicate with each other?
So that's the question of, do you need the encryption for the fire radios or not? So that may be the question you have to answer. If you're gonna encrypt dispatch talk groups, you would want to buy, I think you have to determine if you're gonna buy the encryption for the fire radios.
All right, I think we would. Jim, what's your comments on all of this?
I think Matt's proposal makes a lot of sense in terms of how to step into it. And I think you've identified the key, I think the biggest variable. Once you decide AES, I don't think fire has access to a lot of the tactical talk groups anyway. So, you change those as you deem appropriate to AES. But the big variable is if police want to, and understand why they would want to change their dispatch talk groups to AES encryption, then it was a clear consensus from the survey we did of the fire chiefs is that they would then want the ability to hear those talk groups, which means they would need encrypted radios. So I think, that's the logical decision. Now, Matt makes a great point, is timing. In other words, you can leave your talk groups non-encrypted for some period of time while you're getting new radios, while fire's getting new radios, and then make that change, a year or two down the road. But I think the short answer from the survey was, if police are going to eventually encrypt, then they want and need the encryption. And I think active shooters are probably the classic example where it would be absolutely critical to have that kind of ability to hear and listen, but it's used every day.
Okay, so help me understand it then. So when we buy new portables, they'd have the 256 encryption software or hardware, whatever it is, would not be enabled until everyone in the system was ready to go to it. Is it that simple?
So I would have it enabled, but I want for talk groups that are, so ITTF has some encrypted talk groups that are 256. They're not in your radios today. I would deploy the radios with those in them. So police would automatically get these encrypted channels, but your TAC channels, they would say ADP. So you can have both types of encryption enabled in the radio, ship them out, get people familiar with them, and then at a later date, we introduce a new TAC channel that is AES 256, and then at the time of choosing, say 9 o'clock on this day, this is now your new TAC channel. You switch to that channel, now you're AES, you're using an AES encrypted talk group.
Okay, just the TAC channels, or would it be the entire system?
It's how far we want to go.
Okay.
I was trying to decouple that decision, but I think the fire question's the question that you have to answer of, if you encrypt all the police talk groups, then fire probably wants some encryption in their radios. So I think you need to know that for the purchasing of the fire radios, but I don't think you want to do any of this at time of handing out new radios. Just because it means you have to get a radio in everyone's hand. So you pick your favorite dispatch channel, all the agencies that are on that channel, every officer that's on there, you have to hand that new radio and update councils all at the exact same time to do the transition. And I just don't see that being a plan for success.
Okay. Great.
Can I ask Matt a question?
Go ahead.
Matt, I understand everything you said, certainly as it relates to AES encryption. What if police went to ADP? Is it still the same problem for their dispatch talk groups?
Yeah, because the ADP is not turned on in the fire radios today either.
It could be. Here's why I'm thinking about the question is.
Yes.
One thing about the question is, Linda's talked about, keeping some legacy radios. Obviously, there's some challenges now with batteries and other things, but there's certainly an environment where that makes sense. People not going in hazardous environments, command staff, whatever. I was just trying to think, is there some way to, a step shorter than AES? Now I understand AES would give the highest security to the dispatch talk groups, but just some type of encryption goes a long way. Just trying to think out loud here. Can you put ADP in all the existing, or turn on ADP in all the existing radios, and then if police go to ADP encryption on the dispatch talk groups and not have to necessarily purchase anything different for fire?
I believe it's possible. I don't know if it's how much time it takes versus just getting everyone to the final position.
Understand. Just looking at options. Thanks, man.
So with the ultimate goal then be to go to 256. It seems to me that that's where everyone's going nationally.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. All right, and then, Kevin Simpson, I see you're still on there. We have a number of outside agencies that have access to our talk groups. Kevin, I don't believe that we'd end up paying for your encryption or anything else. So do you have any comments about this?
I had a couple of questions, Bill. I guess if I understand, I want to make sure I'm getting this clear. We have 2 base stations, one at each high school, and then 2 portable radios, one at each school. Those are only a couple of years old. Would those have to fully be replaced, or could those be encrypted with the current radios that we have?
Matt, would you know the answer?
So are those APEX 7000s radios?
I believe so. What I don't know is the base that we got. The bases were like the school radios or radios that were donated by Motorola, and I'd have to check a model number on that.
So I think.
But I think they're 6000s.
Okay.
Yeah, they're APX 6000s.
So I believe you can add the ADP to the 6000s, but you can't add AES 256 to the 6000s. Like you can't take the new encryption standard into the old radio. So, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. So I think you could turn on ADP and you could buy the feature that if Motorola is still selling that key, you could turn that on to use that. But once we went to AES 256, you would need a radio that could do AES 256.
Okay, and that's good to know, because I don't think the cost of encryption from my standpoint, from a budget standpoint, would be a problem. But getting brand new radios would be something I'd have to plan for. What kind of timeline are we talking? If I had to replace these radios, what's the timeline on that then?
I think the short answer is Chairman Schwarzy would like a proposal from this group in the August timeframe for budgeting purposes. But what we have done in the past is allow agents, each ESB has done the purchase and then allowed agencies, if they need to buy off of it, reimburse us. So we could work some of that through for people's fiscal years and planning as well.
All right, and again, what's the cost of the new radios approximately? I don't need, quote, but just to plan accordingly, see if this is even something that'd be palatable at the district level.
Assuming we stay with Motorola, you're looking probably between 6,000 and 8,000, depending on the radios and what the final outcome of what you're adding on to it is.
Okay, I know, again, for the time and effort that we've invested to get to this point to have the interoperability, and I know it was touched upon, especially during active shooters or critical incidents in the high school environment. It's been invaluable. We haven't had any of those, knock on wood, but there have been several incidents that it's proven to be very valuable. And that, I'll give you an example. There was an armed robbery a couple blocks away from one of the schools that we were able to monitor on the base radio and the portable that were allowed us to take action in the school to go shelter in place and protect the staff and students without having to worry about the dispatch or, the police department with 100 other things going on for them to contact us. We were taking action immediately. But again, I think we've invested a little bit of time and effort into this that I wouldn't want to move away from the interoperability that we do have. But I have to come up with a way to either approach this with the district, if that's the route we're going to go as far as replacing all the radios. Matt, would the same apply to the base radio that I have once I get you the information, or will all the bases have to be replaced as well?
It all depends on the make and model, so we'd have to look at that.
All right, yeah, I'll send you that and then you can let me. I think if we have the bases and they can be changed and there's a cost associated with that, it won't be bad because those are in our command centers at the schools, and the portables we'd have to worry about later. But if I had one of the two, it would be very helpful.
And this brings up the point though. So encryption's great from keeping people from listening, but it is the thing that breaks down on interoperability, right? So more you encrypt, less interoperability you have, or harder it is to do interoperability. And that's the check and balances that we have to have is, do we need police talk groups that are clear that you can make sure anyone can listen to, so you can talk to anybody that has that talk group?
Okay.
Even if we were to purchase beginning of next year, the rollout would take some time. And as Matt said, getting the encryption lined up and the update of the talk groups would take us some time. That would be the next phase of this. Hey, Matt or John Lozar, on the 7,000s, can those be encrypted to the level that's being discussed here? Because we would, as we replace police portables, have 7,000s, and there is no battery issue there currently. Knock on wood, we should probably start buying those. But
The answer for the Apex 7000s is no, because that required an actual hardware module for it to accept the AES 256 encryption. All the radios going forward from Motorola, the 8000s, the 6000 BN versions, are all software versions of the 256 encryption.
could they be updated? Is that you can buy?
The 7000s, no.
Okay.
All right.
Chief, got one more question.
Yeah.
Linda, you confused me on the battery issue. I thought we were talking before, I thought the battery issue was with the 7000s. Am I mistaken?
Fire 7,000s, not police.
Sorry, thank you. 7000 XEs. That's,
yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm with you. Thanks.
And Chairman Hayden, Andy Dine, I have one question about encryption.
Sure, go ahead, Andy.
How does, this would be for Matt, how does this affect the patch that we have in place with Naperville ETSB radios and DuPage ETSB radios?
So those talk groups aren't encrypted today. I envision that we're not encrypting those. Just like right now, what I understand the plan to be is police wants all of their talk groups encrypted. Fire doesn't, but fire wants to be able to listen to the police, right? So I don't see us encrypting any of the fire talk groups. We have never in the past. So I would assume that that's where we were headed. But I want us to confirm that. So
okay,
if we don't encrypt it, there's no changes and you'd still have access to that patch.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Hey, Linda, I had one more quick question from a school standpoint. Is there any way when all these replacement radios, even if there's one that's, say the PDs are replacing a radio and it's at 8,000 and it's still compatible with an upgrade that would allow for encryption, is there any way that could be reused or that the district could buy that portable that's being replaced? Or is that not an option?
Well, yeah, we had an evil little plan that was like blown up by batteries and what the upgrades are. So I think once whatever can be redistributed, we'll start with police and fire agencies because there's CSOs and some others as we roll those through. But then the 7,000s for the most part have a zero, they've depreciated to zero. So we can ask to transfer those to anybody at that point. So, it's going to be kind of the roll down of where we can spread these out, and then what's ever left over. I'm sure I don't want to speak for the PAC specifically, but I'm sure everybody would agree that within the system, the schools and other agencies that need to talk to us would be the next place to go. I just don't know how much of that'll be left given the challenges we're seeing with supplies and ability to upgrade, but we'll work on those numbers.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, it seems to me like we may have figured this out, and I'm a little surprised. I thought this was going to be a really tough issue. But it seems like we figured it out. Matt, Jim?
I think the question still is are we encrypting police dispatch talk groups? The answer is yes, then you have to buy encryption for fire radios. If the answer is no, then maybe you save some money and we don't buy encryption for fire.
Okay.
I think the second part of that is the issue we just talked about with schools and all the other agencies. The timing of that is, when you buy the radios, then you have AES 256 capability. When do you make that move? As Matt said, probably not day one, but obviously if that's something the police want, they'd want to do it relatively soon. I would guess that means that, fire's got to follow along quickly. And then you have all the, outside agencies, which, and count them, but there's about 25. To the extent you want to have interoperability, they would also have to be moving in lockstep. So, I think it's both a decision making and then a Gantt chart with, when do you make all these moves? And I think Matt's got the right approach, that you don't want to try to just do everything day one. You set yourself up for future success and then do it step by step, incrementally, as say fire is ready, as outside agencies are ready. Then you make the moves. PAC you can do quickly. So.
Okay, so the ultimate decision though is probably that, if I'm understanding this right, is that we purchased the new radios with the AES 256 capability. Is that Linda? Do we do a roll call on that? Or is this just conversation? We're putting encryption and then moving on to features. Is these just talking points and then we put the package together? Do we TA on things? How are we going to handle this so that we're all together on this? Linda just disappeared.
Chairman Hayden.
Yeah, Steve.
Matt, if I could just ask one more. On 256, we could do channel-to-channel encryption, so you can encrypt channel 1 and 2, not 3, 4, 5. Is that correct?
Yes.
So,
And if you get multi-key, you can do different keys for those, so different people can have access to them.
right, and I think to to Kevin Simpson, and I'm looking at the list of all the other agencies that have subscribed or are subscribing. I think we just have to give them notice. If law enforcement's going to move over, we've got to supply notice to people and say, here's where we're going. You can follow with us. I'm kind of sold up on the 256 encryption. I think that it has more, it sounds like it's more acceptable nationwide. But certainly in the law enforcement side, I think we need to have an encryption system. And with fire, to fire's response, we're going to have to get them the encryption codes or the encryption keys as well. Now, whether that's phased in over time, whether that really, how the templates are designed, I think the template as we start going through it is going to be the important factor. Because if we're going to be, it may take us 3 or 4 years to do a total transfer over. So really, how you build that template for the talk groups is going to be a key to this. But I think moving over to 256 makes sense.
I also have one comment, please.
Yeah, John.
Yes, the radios come with no encryption. So you would have to purchase ADP, which is a $0 option, but you have to make sure that you apply for that option along with the AES 256.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, so Linda, you're back on there. Is this just a TA? What is this conversation? So we know where we're going now.
I think if everybody's okay with this, what I think we should start doing is writing the certain parts of the report as you're making decisions, because I feel like it's too abstract. So if you can see what you're thinking about, it's much easier to discuss what you want to recommend if you can kind of see it in writing. Plus so I'll start crafting some of these things on these sections based on the outline that we had, so that the PAC can review it and say, okay, that's not quite what we want, or this is what we want, and start moving it forward. And I just think it's easier when you see it in writing and then I don't think you need to approve any sections one at a time. I think you just make the recommendation for the report at the end, if that works for everybody.
Works for me. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good way to do it. See it in front of you, because it's going to be a complex piece when we're done. Because we've got our phasing of law enforcement, we've got fire phasing, we've got our partner phasing. So I think that's a really good way to go, Linda. Now, Chairman Hayden, I have another question is about on the radios. We're talking Motorola, but with 256, that's a platform that can go over any product. Is that correct? It's not proprietary to one vendor.
Boy, Steve, I wish I could.
That is correct. 256 is a national standard, an APCO national standard. Can be adopted by any manufacturer.
So then that goes into it is that, do we need, and again, maybe this is way ahead of it, but do we need then to draft a product that we would use, or would it just be a standard? And if I were to buy radios for my volunteers, I could buy any radio that meets that standard. How are we going to handle something like that? Or is that so far down the road that we should not even concern ourselves with it at this point?
I'm ready to discuss that one down the road. Not to forget about it, but yeah, definitely. Tech.
I think it helps with us since we picked a standard. It gives you the flexibility down the road to look at that. I don't think we have to decide if we're gonna allow it or not, but I think that's another reason why we're picking the standard of 256.
Okay.
All right. All right, so we're on item 6.2, and is there any other discussion surrounding encryption? All right, great conversation today. Appreciate it, everybody. We'll move on to item number 7 then, old business. I don't have anything under old business. Linda? Was that?
Not this time. We talked about the batteries, so that's all. That was the only news I had.
All right, item 8, new business. I don't have anything. No one's raising their hand there. Number 9 is the next meeting for us is June 7th, 2021 at 9 a.m. We'll have an agenda ready for you prior to that. And number 10, if I can get a motion to adjourn with your name, please.
So move Barman.
Second, Heron.
All right, those in favor? No, we need a roll call to adjourn.
We can do a roll call. Member Barman.
Aye.
Member Donna.
Yes.
Chairman Hayden.
Yes.
Member Heron.
Yes.
Member Hurd.
Yes.
Member Jones.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks.